Let's get back to the open support for Hezbollah at protests in Sydney and Melbourne on the weekend. There were no arrests, but the AFP has told me earlier that charges won't be far off.
We obviously have to satisfy the prosecution policy before we put a matter to CDPP for prosecution. The matters that have come to our attention until now have not met the threshold for, reasonable prospects of a successful prosecution. However, as I said, based on what I've reviewed in the last few days, I am confident we will have matters to put before the court.
Let's go to Alex Ryvchin from the Executive Council of Australian Jewry. Good to talk to you again, Alex. Do you buy this stuff we're getting from the police, that all this bureaucratic nonsense about the thresholds not being passed? Why don't they just charge people who are illegally waving these flags and put it to the courts?
They absolutely should. Look, I have great sympathy for the police and for the Deputy Commissioner. I have no doubt they don't want this element on our streets. They just want to keep society safe. The police have been horribly vilified and attacked by these protesters and by the Australian Greens. But this whole notion about context, the context in which these flags and the portraits of Nasrallah are brandished, to me it sounds nonsensical. I mean, let's think about what Hezbollah is. Hezbollah has been designated by our government as a terrorist organisation on the advice of our security agencies because it carries out terrorism around the world, because it deliberately kills civilians in tourist buses and community centres and in embassies. This is what it does. So in what context is it okay to stand on the streets of our cities with the portrait of its leader, with its flag, and to chant things like death to America, death to Israel, and I pledge my support to you, Nasrallah? In what context is that okay?
Yeah.
We've been talking for nearly a year, Chris, about social cohesion in this country. And if people are allowed to do this sort of thing, the whole notion is a sham.
I agree wholeheartedly. It's just unthinkable that that's not illegal, and they should be before the courts already. That leads me talking about a year. Of course, next Monday will be the one-year anniversary of the October 7th atrocities. Obviously, Jewish groups will want to commemorate the date in some way, shape or form. Are you worried about what sort of backlash there could be from anti-Israeli groups?
Well, we've already seen advertised rallies by the pro-Palestinian segments of our society for October 7th. Now, let's bear in mind that on October 7th, that was the day of those mass atrocities of the abduction, rape and the slaughter of 1,200 people. We have a hostage crisis which persists to this day with over 100 people held in captivity in Gaza. The Israeli response, the natural and reasonable response, only began days after that. So the fact that they're rallying on October 7th, we're fearful that we're going to see the same sort of scenes that we saw on October 7 itself, where people were driving through the streets, flying flags, clerics from the streets, talking about this as a day of great pride and celebration and joy. These people have had our streets, have taken them over for every week in the past year. They've bled the coffers of our state government. They've diverted police resources. They've brought anti-Semitism, fascism and racism to our streets. I ask these people, show a skerrick of decency. Enough is enough. At least on October 7, let the decent people of this country come together to mourn.
Exactly. Stay home. Let people mourn. Thanks so much for joining us again, Alex. I appreciate it. Alex Ryvchin there from the Executive Council of Australian Jewry. Now, I'm going to head to the US in just a moment, where Donald Trump's copping plenty of flack for